I'd like to welcome you to the May 3rd, 2023 City Council meeting. Roll call. To my left, Lee Cragen, Jason Upchurch, Naomi Diaz by phone, Heather Newsom, Caleb Stapp, City Director Roger Krieger, City Attorney Chuck Zimmerman, City Clerk Treasurer Debbie Cragen. So I would ask you to stand at this time for invocation. You have the floor.
Thank you. Scripture says that where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, you are in their midst. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for enabling us to gather for this City Council meeting on such a beautiful, warm evening. We ask your blessings on the people who have been called to lead our community, where we live, where we work, and relax. Help them as leaders not to ask, how can we fix this, but what do we need to learn? How might we need to change? And to whom do we listen to? Lord, remind them that you are the Good Shepherd, and they should listen to your voice as part of any debate and discussion. We ask that you continue to shower your abundant blessings on our mayor, our city council members, department heads, and those in attendance tonight. Finally, renew each of us with your strength of your presence. We ask this in Jesus' name, as sons and daughters confident in your goodness and your love. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up, item 4, approval of agenda. Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Naomi. Item 5, approval of April 19th, 2023 regular council meeting minutes. Motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Item 6, interested citizens, oral communications, requests and comments from the audience on unrelated agenda items. Barb, we'll start with you.
Where do I go? I've never been.
Right there.
Right here. Okay. Okay. My name is Barbara Dunn, and this is Ray Dunn. We've lived in Deer Park for just a little over 6 years. I'm just recently retired, and so my goal has been I'd like to get more involved in my community now that I have time and I'm not driving into Spokane every day. So I've done a little bit more just paying attention and kind of trying to figure out where myself and my husband might be able to fit in to contribute to our community. It seems like recently, and I want to apologize ahead of time because I haven't studied the budget, I haven't gone back and read other minutes here, so I'm kind of coming, both of us are coming kind of as newbies here, letting you know that our desire is we'd really like to be more active, but we'd also like to be heard at the same time. And one time I had a state representative tell me for every phone call they got in their office, they figured that it represented 20,000 people. So I'm here today as a senior citizen of Deer Park to kind of just give my feedback, praise. In the 6 years that I've lived here, I've seen great improvements in Deer Park. I've seen the city parks be well maintained. I'm seeing new playground equipment. I think we've greatly improved on snow removal, which I know especially this year has been a really hard thing for you guys to deal with. So I thank you for that. I have to say lately, I think what's caught my attention more is I feel a divisiveness in our city council. And we have so much in our country that I'm urging the city council. I don't know if you're required to work on consensus, but I would certainly like to see more support of each other on the council. I was recently disappointed to see that Deer Park made the local Spokane news. And to me, it didn't shed good light on Deer Park. And in fact, it made me more skeptical of what city council is trying to do. I felt that there were statements thrown out on the news. One person said, "I've called the police 3 times and I've had no response." So if you're calling the police, there's different reasons that you call the police. And they're not going to be able to come out and respond every time. And I think that when we have those expectations, we're always going to feel like we were failed. And I would just like to see the city council communications come from the council. I would like to see the city council work on consensus. I'm hearing a lot of monies that want to be spent here in Deer Park. And I'm just going to say some things that might not go over really well here, but I walk the streets, I pay attention, especially more in the last year. And I understand we want our own police department. And honestly, I haven't made a decision about that because I feel like the council hasn't really put out facts, and maybe it's too premature, and I haven't made a decision. But what I can tell you is our streets haven't been swept. Our sidewalks are a mess. Our downtown looks tired and dirty. And we've talked about a splash pad, and my first question was, we can't even guarantee that we're going to keep our pool open for the summer, and yet we have a council who wants to spend money and put a splash pad in. I'm concerned about those things, and I would like to see the council show that we can manage what we have going on here and earn the trust and the confidence of the people in Deer Park. If you ever remember back in New York City 40 years ago, they had a horrible crime problem. And I think they called it the broken window, whatever. And they went into the city and they cleaned it up and they established a pride in the city, and crime rate went down. I'm encouraging you as a council to not be so quick to spend our money and to look at managing what we have here and how we can best manage it like we would manage our own households. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I don't actually agree with my wife on the police issue, which is fine. But again, when you guys put it out on Facebook or whatnot, and it's not a council decision, you're throwing little chips at one another, that doesn't do anybody any good at all. Again, on the police force, you were told that somebody in the audience had called 3 times and they didn't show up. I called them myself last year and they were there within 5 minutes. So is this 3 calls to get a cat out of the tree, or is this somebody breaking into your house? I guarantee you, if I call those guys and I say I have somebody breaking into my house, they're going to be there. So now you have to convince us that the money you want to spend on a police force is worth our dollar compared to what we already have with the training we have. Now, again, we don't have all the facts, but we're going to dig into this. So if you guys that want this police force in town, is it true, here's a question for you to come out and send to the public, if we go to a municipal police force, is our mutual aid with Spokane County now null and void? Guess what? If it is, we have to call on Spokane or we have to call on Chihuahua, and they're 30 some minutes out. Whereas if we keep a county police force, we have Stevens County, we have Spokane County, and they're right there.
Spokane Valley.
So that's something. My biggest thing is keep city business in this city hall. Don't put it out with partial information out on the internet, just like you're seeing on our national news on our highest government. We don't want this here. That's why we're here. You sparked our interest. We're getting involved. The people here put you in that seat to represent them. The people here can take you out of that seat. You have to do what we want collectively. Thank you.
Richie, you're up next.
Go. Okay. So the thing I was actually going to comment on is when you're having the interested citizens comment. For many years, it was at the end of the meeting, which I think actually saves a lot of time, because a lot of what's happening now is that there's a lot of questions that get answered through the process of the meeting, or people have questions or statements that they'd like to make that would come up in a public hearing. So I think by having it at the beginning of the meeting, which may be more common according to Robert's Rules of Order, but having it at the end of the meeting might save more time and going back to the way it had been. And that way we can ask questions on what we've heard and not have to ask the questions on things that are going to be covered ahead of time. I just would like to say honestly, also on another subject, I appreciate your guys' use of electronic media to keep us engaged and in the know about what is going on with the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Richie. Joe, you're up.
Okay, thank you,
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor. Richie, you stole a little bit of my thunder, but I have a lot more, so don't worry. You know, it's great. In fact, it's on the agenda as new business tonight. Emails, ADA, compliance, so people with hearing problems can hear things at the meeting. But I want to point out that there's only, if somebody like me right now wants to address the entire council at once and the mayor, there's only one place you can do it. It's here. You can only do it twice a month at the meetings. And aside, Richie brought up the moving from the end of the meeting to the beginning, and I agree with him completely on that. And to start with, otherwise, when we read the interested citizens, it says, comments from audience on unrelated agenda items. That's not very clear. I mean, to me, that indicates that if it's on the agenda, we're not supposed to talk about it. And if that's true, that's worse, because the agenda stuff is the important things. You know, does that mean that you're supposed to only talk about things like, well, there's a stop sign down at my corner? And you're not supposed to talk about things like the sheriff's agreement or the comprehensive plan. So that's the first thing on my little list. And the list itself is a problem. Because, for instance, Richie's already talked. He had his one shot. It's done. So if there's something I say that he'd like to add to, he's got to wait 2 weeks. That's not a good plan. There's only one comment. Comments before most of the business. The other thing that happened recently with the foul folks, I prefer that to chicken people. I think it sounds a little classier. Somebody was appointed and told, the rest of you people, talk to this person and then they'll bring it together to the council. Well, that in effect suppresses the speech of those other people. Because even if the representative is earnest. She's not going to tell you, I think it's a woman, she's not going to tell you everything that they said. She's going to condense it. If she didn't condense it, it wouldn't be any point because it's going to take just as long either way. The other thing, another thing, boy, I have a list. Arbitrary time limits. I know, I've been up there. Sometimes people do run on. Sometimes people say the same thing. So sometimes you have to say, the mayor has to say, and he has the power, he's the guy running the show. You have to say, listen, we've kind of gone through this. You're kind of running on. And I understand that. Or I remember when Loomis's first the discussion was about whether they were going to run the airport or not. And you think we got a crowd tonight. I remember that night. It was standing room only, and they were out in the hall. They all wanted to say the same thing. So, which was, we think you should do this. They were pilots and people from out there supporting it. And I believe, I think Wisman was mayor then. I think he just started. And he simply said, listen, we get it. You know, we don't have time to have, because everybody wanted to say this is a great idea. Well, there's 60 people. So there's times you're going to do that sort of thing. But when there's arbitrary things like saying 5 minutes or 2 minutes, it doesn't fit. It's not a good idea. I'm almost done.
I don't time you, Joe.
Well, I know, but even saying it is, even if you say it, it's, okay, I've talked about that. You know, I think that's it. There's some other little stuff, and I don't want to belabor it. I think sometimes, in the interest of efficiency, and trying to have things be orderly and efficient, we lose something. And because democracy or republic or freedom, whatever you want to say, isn't orderly and efficient. It's sloppy and loud, and sometimes it's divisive, excuse me. So I would encourage first I'd like to hear, when you guys do report to officers, if you have any comments about this, I'd like to hear it. And I would encourage you to think about, to shorten it up, running a looser show. And keep in mind the spirit of the First Amendment, which says, in effect, Chuck, don't shoot me if I get this wrong, that you should make no law against freedom of speech and the ability to speak, especially political speech, which is what we do here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next up, Kara.
Always. I'm going to quote you later. Hi, guys. I'll make it a little quicker because I'm trying to catch up with a few things. I know last year we were kind of following a trend to figure out if we possibly could change the rules for the chickens, ducks, and rabbits in the town. And I kind of wanted to know how that was running along with how the comprehensive plan was also moving along. I know that had to kind of go in tandem. So I was hoping for a little bit of update with that, if that was even on books, and still kind of show that there's people still willing to show up to this to keep the wheels squeaking. Also,
Karen, yeah. So tonight we're actually voting on the beginnings of the comprehensive plan update. 2 years at the outside, maybe.
Yeah.
So, welcome to government. Slowly.
Yeah, playing part. And so I had also heard and was reminded by, thank you, the splash pad in the area. I'd heard it kind of it fizzled out on boats or something, and I wasn't here for that, and I don't know what meeting that was, so kind of hearing what did happen with that, you know, for the youth of the area to keep them busy. And then I think that was kind of where I was at.
The splash pad, it's put on the back burner right now.
Okay.
If funding grants come up, we can reapply at that time.
Okay.
So it's not a dead soldier.
Okay, but a kind of a funding allocation.
Right.
Okay, that's, reasonable to hear. It's a, kind of a luxury item, so thank you again for all your guys' help and diligence here.
Thank you. Item 7, new business. iWorQ service agreement, permit management, code enforcement, and portal home. Jake, would you like to speak on that?
Sure. My name is Jake Barless. I'm the building inspector and code enforcement officer for all of you that have heard me but have never seen my face. Here I am. So I came from another jurisdiction where we used an automated permit system as an inspector, and when I was on the other side of the fence, I dealt with other jurisdictions that also used automated systems, which streamlined the whole process. So with Roger leaving, I figured no better time than the present to help us, our team here at the city, become hopefully more efficient. And so by streamlining our permit process through a system called iWorQ that we found. I had researched a few companies, and I found iWorQ for the money. We got the big spang for the dollar amount. So I'm just going to share, and I have Shadowy with us. Maybe not. Shadow's going to be on the phone, the salesman from the company, but just put together a few items.
Yes, speak up.
Yep, I'm here, Jake. Sorry.
All right, thank you, Chad. So the goal of iWorQ is to streamline our permit process, like I said, and our desire is to make our team more efficient. And the system is going to take us from a manual input, what we do now. I don't know if you've been getting permits lately, but we write everything down. And we go over to the permit number, we write everything down, everything's written. And we put them in boxes, and they go upstairs, and they get stored. And so I want to take that and turn everything over to automated, so everything's entered on a computer. Everything's stored on the computer. So there's no more third floor going to retrieve old files to check for history. Everything's at our fingertips on a computer, so hence the proficiency. Again, the storage would be on the cloud versus, again, in boxes on the third floor. One thing we get, a couple things we get with this is parcel history for inspections. Code violations, we're going to integrate our GIS mapping system, so we'll be able to see each parcel, and we can click on that parcel and see the history on it, whether it's a code enforcement issue, whether it's or an inspection history, what happened at that parcel over the time. I've gone back and entered in things. So automatically, a big thing also is right now we manually do reports. Brandon does them on monthly reports that are due to the county, quarterly and annually. So this system will run those reports automatically for us. So that's a bunch of time saved from somebody having to go in and manually put all that data in to send it where it needs to go. Inspections can be seen online, so our customers out in the field, I'll be entering them online so they can check to see how the inspections went. They can submit all of their plans and permit applications online. The county of Spokane's already gone all digital. I don't see us going all digital, like digital reviews at first, but ultimately that's where I think the industry is pushing us, is to be all digital reviews. So we'd be well on our way down that road when that hits, when we get kind of mandated to do that, if we foresee that happening. And then for code enforcement, when I get a call or get a letter, I go out, take a picture of the issue. That's saved on the computer, and then that starts tracking all my letters that are sent out. So if we have to go to take that to the next step, we have that paperwork all in one simple spot to be saved and to retrieve easily. So I apologize. I just found out I was speaking last night, and I've been going since 3:15 this morning. I just got back from Ellensburg. So that's the big reason why I'm pushing for this system. Basically make it 10 times easier on the staff and make us just more efficient for the city. So a lot of the inspections can be called in from our contractors online. So we take a lot of the phone time off from Jessica and Brandon and Debbie and myself and whoever else is here scheduling inspections. They'll be able to do that online on their own. So,
can I ask a question? Yes. Spokane County, currently has the Stapp, and it shows quite a bit of information on there as far as parcel and stuff. Will this iWorks integrate with that or be something totally separate?
No, it's our own system.
Okay.
Yep.
Will we be able to get the same type of information by citizens logging into the iWorks, or do we only still have Scout?
Well, if you're a contractor and you have a project going, you'll have access to view your project. I don't know, Chad, can you answer that question? I don't know who all is granted access to go in and look at the different parcels.
It just sounds to me like there's a lot of information that's going on.
Basically, how it works, we can set it up a couple different ways. It's going to be based on what you guys want. That's the biggest thing, is we are able to configure it all to what you guys want and your process. So if you want citizens to be able to view their either permit status or even their code violations and everything that's been done on that, on the portal, there is a section where it basically, they would have to search based on certain criteria. So like if they had their permit number, that way not everybody, in the municipality can see everything that's going on. But if a citizen took their permit number, entered it into that section, it would then pull up the status of their permit, any inspections, as well as what happened on those inspections, whether it passed, failed, pending, whether there's any corrected notes. It'll show their fees and if it's been paid or not. It'll even give them the opportunity to, if they need to print out another copy of their permit, they would be able to do so. And there is a way for them to, if you want it set up this way, they can actually message directly off of that permit on the portal to ask any questions, which would then send like Jake or whoever it may need it to go to an email, basically letting them know that said citizen had a question about this permit, type of a deal. But we can set it up so it can be that way, or you don't have to let them basically view all of that information if you don't want to. If you just want it set up so they can only apply, and then your contractors can basically submit for inspections, we can go that route. Or if you want them to be able to see the status and any updates, we can do it that way as well.
Thank you, Chad. That answers my question. It's limited access or very little access, and that was the answers I was looking for.
So Tim, let me add. So currently in our water base map system and our pressure profile system, the Esri mapping system brings in the Scout GIS data to that will then also get tied into this. So in theory, all that information comes through. I don't know about querying it, and I'm not sure the access will allow people to have, but that's the data layer. But if you wanted something specific on a county parcel somewhere, you'd still have to go to Scout, the county system, to get that.
Well, I know when you go to Scout, like if I go to my address and I click on permits, which I did to see what was happening with mine, it just told me to go talk to the city.
Right.
And so that's why I was kind of wondering if Scout would then direct you onto this iWorQ, or it would be integrated. So
and their data fields aren't going to necessarily be accessible still for the city of Deer Park stuff through the county Scout system.
Thank you.
Yeah, like in your case, Linda, you would have been able to go online and see pending contractor
Right.
getting back to me.
Right.
So those kind of things, which would be nice about it. You had a permit number, so you'd be able to go on and see what the status of your permit was.
Who's waiting on who, or who's waiting on what type of situation.
Exactly.
Good?
Yep, any other questions? Thank you.
So then what you have just is you have an agreement in here. It's for that. Is there an annual fee to it as involved with every one of these software packages we keep getting? And then the initial setup is $2,700. So it's a system where, and Jake's right. I mean, as we transition around, more people can use this, and the days of the boxes upstairs that you all, if you went up on the tour, you saw. So.
Do we need to take action on this tonight?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion to approve.
And I'll second it.
Okay, motion second. Any comments or questions by
I'm
council?
very excited about this. Thanks for leading the way, and I was really surprised at how cheap it was.
Right, yeah.
That's
That's what got me going.
And I would encourage us to permit as much citizen interaction and messaging and everything as possible, because that seems really valuable.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Naomi? Okay, thank you. Motion carried. Item B, interlocal agreement, law enforcement services provided by Spokane County Sheriff's Office to the city of Deer Park. With us tonight is Under Sheriff. Chuck, I'm going to have you speak first, and if we have any questions, the Under Sheriff will answer them. Yes, sir?
Sorry, I was in the hall. Say that.
I said you'll answer questions if we ask them.
Fire away.
Okay. Chuck's going to start.
Well, just briefly, the current agreement with the county is the subject of a revision with another jurisdiction. And as a result of that, the undersheriff and the sheriff have been in communication with Tim and Roger, and then with me about making a revision for the city that is economically beneficial. There's a cost savings associated with entering into this new agreement. It's a short-term agreement that can be long-term. There are outs within the agreement, so you're not locked in for an indefinite period of time, but it does change and allow you to add an officer and have a different price point. So I've reviewed it. I'm willing to approve it as to form because it meets with the things that we had talked about before, because we've been through this. This is my third go-round with the sheriff's office on different agreements, and frankly, this one, they moved closer to the position that we moved into the last time, I think, for most of the jurisdictions. I think that's a fair way of saying it. They used to have a very complicated way of deciding how much you owe, the settle and adjust thing, and that's kind of gone by the wayside, and this is more specific, so you know exactly what you're paying, and it's all set out in the agreement. So
I think that I haven't had a chance to be out there in a while. I'm Mike Kittleston, I'm sure. I have all my unincorporated patrol. Maybe I'll stand here. I'm going to be leaving with the crane next. So I worked for the sheriff's office. It'll be 28 years in September. When I started in 96 or 95, Patrol 96, I was in Deer Park and Elk on Graveyard. Many times north of Wander from here by myself for many a night, long nights. We changed a lot in 28 years. So now I'm under Sheriff. Ozzie brought me in, and then Sheriff Knowles decided to keep me. So that's where I'm at. And to the point about the new contract, one of the first things I noticed when I came in as the unincorporated under Sheriff was that our settle and adjust contracts with the small cities were complicated. It was hard to plan. I try to look at all these things from both sides, and I looked at the other side, and this is extremely complicated. It was complicated for our budget office, the county side, not sheriff's budget office, big county's budget office, because they would do the settle and adjust. They were constantly sending, hey, we need another little bit for this or a little bit for that. What we asked the budget office to do was take our total number of commissioned deputies and everything behind it. And that list is included in your current addendum. I printed it off, and I even added some things. It's that long. It's everything the sheriff's office provides, soup to nuts. And the county came up with the new amount, which actually is a savings compared to what you're currently paying per deputy. It also allows you in your budgeting process to anticipate what that cost will be, instead of wondering when the county decides to do their settle and adjust very late in the year. And usually county budgets are done far later than the municipalities. It creates problems for you all. And so we said, listen, we need to simplify this whole process and get away from the settle and adjust. And they were more than happy to also agree to that. And so that's how we ended up with this. So there are some options in there for additional deputies. We're ready to provide a third deputy to Deer Park immediately because of some other staffing advantages we have unincorporated. So obviously that's all for you to decide the level of service you want to provide, but that is something we're ready to move forward on.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to approve.
In a second.
Naomi, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
So, Tim, can I
Okay.
Go ahead.
So Council knows in our discussions, we started from the concept of 2 deputies, which we have now, obviously, and obviously we're working towards more deputies, that's what we've been hearing. And so in this agreement, you'll notice it's set up for 4 deputies, although there's not availability of that 4th one yet.
Right.
But in theory, the price tag at the base officer goes to $900,000 for 3 deputies, 40-hour shifts, 2 in the graveyard, I think is the plan, and 1 during the day. And that 4th deputy, when they would come along, would be added to prove it as the concept is. But we won't get billed for it until they show up. And so the call has been for more deputies. We've heard at the council several times how crime's so bad and all those kinds of things. And so that was the base discussion point that Tim and I were using when we started working with this, is how many deputies we wanted to have and the cost. And so that's why you see it as an agreement for 4 deputies. If you decide you want 3 or if you want 2. Now's the time to make that decision, obviously, to whittle it down. So anyway, that's fine.
Yeah, I appreciate the getting rid of that settle and adjust. That was a nightmare.
So we're going to start with any comments or questions by the council. We're going to start with questions.
Okay, I was just chatting.
Okay. Questions?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, Undersheriff, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate this. I'm excited about a 3rd deputy, but I do have some questions. So question 1 would be, how do we go from paying approximately $350,000 per deputy to down to $300,000? Can you help us understand the cost basis for our deputies?
Because the county we asked the county to reevaluate it. I was not part of the old contracts and the settle and adjust, so I'm going off what I've heard, and so maybe it's third hand. However, when they did this and we discovered that it was actually a cost savings, right now you're paying about $707,000 a year for 2. You would be paying $600,000 for 2. That's $107,000. So typically governments aren't real big into refunding money or sending money back. However, the county knew by evaluating the way we run our operations that was an amount that was reasonable. Now there is a 3% cost escalator in there that, as we talked about, if inflation goes down or inflation significantly increases, we'll obviously have to have conversations with that within the contract. This initial contract is that. So in a roundabout way, I hope I'm answering your question. I don't know exactly how the old number came to be versus what the new number is. But I can tell you we have more services now and in the near future, in the next year, that we didn't have back then, such as the Real-Time Crime Center, a $42 million training facility, which would be the nicest training facility, and I would hazard to say on the West Coast, that the county footed the entire bill for, along with the Air Force. There's some things that we're doing now that we didn't do in the past that never hit that bill. So it's just value added, I believe.
So I like the reduction in price per deputy. That's a good thing. It still seems high. I contacted King County and Snohomish County this week. King County, their contract deputies are around $245,000 per deputy. Snohomish County is about $204,000 per deputy. And so ours are considerably higher even than King County.
Okay. I have no idea what their metrics are, so I can't answer or compare. I know that the county went, like I said, it was front to back. It was everybody in the county that touches a percentage of our budget, and they figured in all those indirects and just the cost of what it costs to put Deputy Dennis on the street. Not just his car and but obviously the indemnity, all those things. There's so many parts to some of these contracts when we government's work. I couldn't speak to how King County came up to their number. I would really have to have almost an accountant analyze if the numbers they're using are exactly the same as I'm sorry, I don't know. We could ask the budget office that, certainly.
Could we get a breakdown of?
Sure. Roger, is that something that we could? Is that something you want me to talk with Mr. Withrow about, or do you want to?
Well, it'd be interesting, to know what. I don't know if you get it from the county's budget office, let alone get it from King County's budget office, but that might be a challenge.
Sure.
Caleb, do you have a question?
I do. Were you finished?
I think so.
Okay. Yes, I did. So yes, at this point,
it would be a cost reduction, but the cost is significantly higher as soon as we get to 4 deputies. 3 deputies is cheaper, but under our current contract, it's the base price is the $680, and then it's $110 per deputy after that. And so as soon as we have 4 deputies versus 3, the current contract is actually far cheaper. And then from there on up, to get us to full-time coverage would take, people have told us, 6 or 7 deputies. And so as we scale, as we need more coverage, if we move to the proposed contract, we're actually paying a lot more in the long run. What's the change on that?
I'm not sure what you're talking about, the 680 plus.
So in the current contract and the addendum at the end of it, it talks about the $660,000 per year as the base cost for 1 deputy. And then in addendum 1, it says another deputy is listed at $110,000 per year. And then that's been the assumption in the past, is that as we added deputies, that was the cost that we would be adding.
At that time.
That's not the way I read it.
That's not the unless you guys had more conversations with Under Sheriff Ritchie, because I was sent the latest one today, and I don't see that in there. Roger, do you know?
Well, the addendum he's talking about, there was addendum 1 and addendum 2 that were done to the original base contract.
Are you talking about the old contract?
Yes.
That's what.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
That wasn't with me. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the new one.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I asked Debbie for the current contract that we're currently operating under.
Sure.
And under that one, as soon as we get to 4 deputies, we're saving significant money, and the savings goes up as we add deputies. So this, to me, as a growing city, we've been asking for more deputies for years. We're finally getting some, which is great. We really appreciate that. But it seems like the game is shifting in that regard to a much higher long-term cost than what we're currently operating under.
I think one way I would look at it is that the unincorporated cannot supplant municipal police services. You know, I live unincorporated, and it would be improper for me to supplant police services in Deer Park, right? Just like it would be improper for Deer Park to supplant unincorporated police services, right? We all pay for what the level of service we want. I think the county, in looking at this, probably discovered that it would be losing money and not cover their true costs if they didn't move to this new cost model.
So this is, and just to be clear, because up until this point, we've been talking about this as a significant savings. But we need to be clear that this is actually a significant increase in price as we grow.
Yeah, we'd be getting an increase in service.
Which is great, but we just need to recognize this is not a cost savings win in the long term. It's a higher cost.
And like from the sheriff's office perspective and from the sheriff himself, you all determine the level of service you want.
Correct.
We provide just like an independent contractor, like, do you want marble or do you want stucco? You know, like you determine the level of service you want.
And we want more, and again, that's great. We need to talk about it correctly. Go ahead.
The part you have to remember is that the 110 was for the first one, potentially for the second one. But with the budget office's new method, the odds of getting to a 4th or 5th or 6th was probably eliminated to 0.
Okay.
You know, so that's the difference between the two, where this proposed contract gets us to 4, where we may never got to 4 without the extra dollars in there, because there was nothing that assured us anything past 2 deputies. So that's what their budgeting office came back with a different formula. So it wouldn't be the same as you get 110 for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's probably not the case at all.
The change to the agreement, addendum number 1 to the existing agreement, provides instead of 660, it's 660 plus 110 for that one additional nighttime deputy. There is no commitment whatsoever by the sheriff's office in that agreement that I can see that says you get a 3rd one for 110, a 4th one for 110. It was a one-time deal because of, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was because of the staffing situation that existed at the time. We have a person we can put there at 110 and we can live with that through the duration of this. And again, because the city wanted flexibility, either party can provide the other notice of termination of that agreement. And there's escalators. So we were at 770 for 2 officers. with an escalator. Now you're back to 6 for 2 officers, 900 for 3 if the motion that's on the table is approved. Effective, and that's one of the other things to think about, is the effective date is blank because we need to be able to coordinate that with Debbie and with the county, what date we would plug in there for when that would begin, because it needs to supplant and replace the 770 agreement. We don't want to have an absolute accounting nightmare is to quit it in the middle of a month when the payment plans. I think Mike agrees with that as well. So I think that there's nothing in there that says we're going to get something, the city's going to get something for 110 in addition. This was a one-off situation that was recent. So I just want to make sure that everybody here is aware that that's the case. Now, whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, that's not a legal deal. That's a council. So, there you go.
Thank you, and that is helpful clarification. The next question was, current contract, page 2 of 10, the termination notice was 12 months before another option to extend that termination process for another 12 months if needed. I just noticed that on the proposed contract, that moves to be more restrictive on the city, with a 24 months being required from notice till termination. What was the reasoning behind that shift?
That matches our existing contract that we have with medical aid as well. It gives more time for both parties to come up with a transition plan, I believe. It takes a long time to start up your own police department. It's actually probably more for you all than for us, because that deputy would just go work somewhere else, right? We have enough vacancies, we're not just going to lay them off. However, 12 months is warp speed just for getting a civil service exam and recruiting people and buying all the equipment. We bought a significant number of Ford police interceptors, and Ford canceled the order, and then we got them like 18 months after the fact, right? We need cars, like I know Matt would probably like to ride a horse around, but we can't do that out because, we're trying to get around, so those are the things. I think it was actually probably more for years, but if you want to strike that to 12 months, I don't think the county would hurt you, but that's up to you also.
I think what the difference is it's going to take 2 years from the day that you decide you want to have your own law enforcement agency to the day that you actually have one. Now, we don't need to change this. You can change it to 24 months. You can change it to 6 months. The reason 24 is better for you, for the city, is if you make that determination down the road, then there's a commitment. And you've made that commitment, and you notify the sheriff's office, and they work with you. It's not like you're going to hire your own police department, and they won't know the officers from the county. They're all going to work together anyway. So when you do start your own law enforcement agency, if you do decide that that's the route that you would want to go, it's going to take you 2 years to fill those positions. Whether you give a year, you could start it, the process, and then give the notice 12 months into the process, or you could give the notice and do the process and everybody's on the same page. So I tend to agree that it's more beneficial to the city to have the 24 months, the longer term, but it doesn't matter if the county's fine with 12 months, you can go with 12 months, but it's going to take you, the last thing I'd like to see you do is have a vote and have the mayor send a letter that says, county, you're out in 12 months, and now the clock's ticking. And I don't know that you'd be able to put it together in 12 months. And then you're back on bended knee saying, hey, how about if we get a few more months?
Unless we're a miracle city.
So it could happen.
That was all my questions.
Under Sheriff, may I ask one more question? Yeah, sure. So the additional deputies, their vehicles would have a Deer Park, City of Deer Park logo? I think that's
for
awesome.
the record, I've been trying to get the company that makes your current logos for almost a year to make me some for the current vehicles, and not having much luck. And so I've reached out to another vendor I did about a month ago to try to get, because the ones that are on your cars that are parked out here, it's like, oh, it's no sense of reinventing the wheel. And we put those on Matt's car and on Deputy Kupo's car, and it's been very difficult to get a call back. So anyway, they're already in the works. We figured we'd just put it in here, just
one
to make sure it continued if I leave.
Thank you.
Barb, go ahead.
Unless you want a different design, sorry. You want something different, tell me, I don't care.
I just have just two questions. Number one is medical aid was mentioned, and I would like a figure as to what medical aid pays for their share of coverage. And secondly, when you quoted King County and Snohomish County, I'd like to know what years that was, because the west side of the state has done a lot of defunding their police departments, and I would like to know what they were paying prior to defunding the police departments over there. So I'm all about facts and information.
Thank you.
So a couple other things that I think we need to not rush on this. Having talked to Sheriff Ozzie and Sheriff Knowles, knowing them both personally, as well as Commissioner Kearns and Senator Short on this whole thing, not only should we keep the 24 months in place, but we shouldn't do our own department because of the cost. And the Undersheriff can correct me if I'm wrong. And part of my voice, I just had surgery not long ago. If we were to go and start our own police department, some of their coverages like SWAT, their chopper, etc., come with an increased cost versus what we're paying now. And then there's other things like jails, both Spokane County and Stevens County are out of space. So I don't think it's any benefit to us to start our own. And then Spokane Valley, correct me if I'm wrong, is also contracted with them, and they have their own uniforms on top of their own logos. So if we want some individuality here with this whole deal, we could go that route, correct?
Yeah, so they have their uniform is the same except they have a different patch.
Yeah.
The left shoulder patch says Spokane Valley Police, and they wear police on the back.
Yeah.
Their cars are significantly different with blue, and then they paid for those, and they buy those separately. They pay for their own vehicles now.
But we'd have that option too.
Yeah, we can certainly talk about it, everything, price is, amenable to everybody. Obviously it's the sheriff's decision, it's his, his folks, and so I don't want to speak for him, but I think he's pretty amenable.
And then the SWAT and chopper thing.
So yeah, so that entire list of the addendum items that you all have in your current contract in Exhibit 1, all the services, plus I wrote down another 8 that weren't listed in here, such as we were involved in a critical incident with a gentleman in South Spokane County, the SWAT team, and it was an officer-involved shooting. That guy is currently in the hospital and with no foreseeable exit date, and we have to guard him 24 hours a day. The jail does not do that because he hasn't been booked. So we have deputies sitting up there 24 hours a day, and if that happens here, you would, how many deputies you have or officers you have would have to take care of that detail. There isn't private companies that do that. The whole list, SWAT and an air support unit, but again, I would refer you all, because I'm going to bore you by reading them all, but all of those would, if we had to come into town, and I talked with the sheriff today, there would be an expense billable to the county for that. Such as if the SWAT team comes out, you have 26, you bring in the robots, the air unit for drones, the negotiators, you're talking about 40 deputies minimum of a footprint at $75 an hour. And overtime, minimum 4 hours, is $12,000 a call, just for 4 hours. And that's back of the neck kind of numbers. Regarding the question you had, ma'am, the contract we're currently negotiating with Medical Lake as well, it's the exact same cost figure. Because they have 24-hour coverage right now. I don't necessarily get into it, but they were looking at other options. And so we expressed an interest to renegotiate that contract as well. And so it is almost a mirror image. The idea between here and there would be, there's no reason it should be different. And Medical Lake, or excuse me, Millwood, I think is next, that has interest.
But I just have a question. Is it okay if we add that list with the new 8 items
Certainly,
to the agreement?
because I
it's
think
not added as part of this agreement, just to be fair technically, but I want to make sure it is added. Because everybody knows it's referenced that we get all the services that the sheriff's office has, but
I remember I read it. It was
we could probably add this to Exhibit 1 if no one has any objection to that.
No objections.
That would be fine with us.
Yeah. Okay.
Just
on the one that's actually signed,
it just writes it all out.
Just another page.
So we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Naomi? Are you with us? Motion carried.
Mayor, real quick, one quick question on that too, while the undersheriff's still here.
Oh, sure, yeah, sir.
Does that number they're giving us per officer include not only reoccurring training? Because if you have, say, firearms qualification, you got to pull an officer and add an officer, and then every time one side of the state in particular adds PC training or God knows whatever else, that's more reoccurring training. Is that number?
It's all inclusive.
It's in, okay.
They will not, there is nothing set up in this contract, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, counsel, but there's nothing in here that is, if in a exigent circumstance clause, I don't believe it's in there. I think it would be the next contract is when we would have to figure out that escalator or something, but I think the way this is written, the way I read it, again, council would have to clarify that for you. Is that right, sir? Is that, as far as like exigent circumstances, I didn't see anything in that, like some weird thing that we have to cover that.
There is a clause about the budgeting review from each side, but not a specific circumstance.
Yeah. So it's all inclusive.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Step up. Michael, Mike, sir, just hang on. I'm gonna chat.
So item C, task order number 2023-07, update to 2017 comprehensive plan, JV engineers. Roger, you want to?
Yeah, so sorry for all the paper here. But the task order lays out now all the stuff that we have to do for our next comprehensive plan update. And since it referenced several times Department of Commerce's checklist that we have to complete, as well as the critical area checklist, and then we still haven't got the ramifications of the last legislative session yet for other things that may come up. But all these parts and pieces of this task order and the checklist are all part of this next cycle. And Jason chided me about 2 years, but there is a lot of work here to get done. So once it's signed, we'll get our consultant back. And in fact, we'll have the traffic people in sooner than later because they're actually here on Main and Crawford counting cars as we speak that are the same company that will check these other intersections that are in this document, those other traffic section intersections we're talking about last council meeting. And so this covers all the elements of the comp plan as far as the land use element, urban growth area, population allocation, parks and recreation, traffic, all those things are what we have to cover through this. Interestingly enough, the county is required to have their plan start by next July 24 and be completed by July of 26. So we're a little ahead of the curve. What also happens from that is there's a grant available from the Department of Commerce, and our portion would be about $125,000, that would be available if we wanted to wait till then towards this cost. Or they haven't really committed to this yet. I'm assuming that we're not going to get all the work done. We're not going to be all billed out before July of 26. I'm pretty sure that Commerce will go from that point forward and be able to reimburse some of the money continuing. Plus, after this comp plan is done, we have development regulations to deal with as well. So one could argue half of the price for this task order could be covered by grants starting next July. So it's not as bad as, it's not all our revenue potentially, but I can't guarantee you with the grant. But if we didn't start until July of 2024, then that's when those pockets of money are available. So quite likely any work we get done beforehand, we can get reimbursed for it. That's probably going to happen. But there are lots of steps here. As I talked to you the last 3 months in getting this task order all put together, there's a lot to do this comprehensive plan update that's mandated by all the cities and all the counties. And the only difference from county to county is the deadlines of when we have to start to be finished. And that's really it throughout the whole state. So we already have a Department of Commerce guy assigned to us. So he'll be our contact back and forth. And the county steering committee has got through parts of the countywide planning policies that we have to do all the documents under. They're still working on some of our other elements that there's going to be change going as we're doing this update that we probably will have to go back and fix things, amend things, and tweak them as it happens, along with the legislative requirements that came out of last session and the next session. So it's going to be a little bit of a moving target, but there's a lot of time involved, and so our options really are to get started, or we could wait a year until that grant fund is there and we know that that's there. But I think Jake will get to deal with this, but I think in the future that money will be still usable. We just can't use money what we've already worked on. So.
Motion to approve.
We have motion second. All in favor? Do you have a question? Oh, start on it.
So
Go ahead.
Oh, I get to start.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay. Some of these are probably fairly detailed. One of the things on the Parks and Recreation part of the comprehensive plan, and I've noticed in the past that our parks plan has seemed to lack much detail and long-term vision. I mean, there's some things in there, but it's not nearly as detailed and as vision-oriented as some of the other pieces. What can we do to help that be more in line with the citizens' desires?
Well, the last parks plan, actually we had a pretty good sized survey. I mean, I don't know if you have a copy of it or not, but there was a pretty detailed survey that came back from what people chose or wanted in that, and that's really where, honestly, where the skate or the splash pad came from before, is we had to have a current and approved comp plan parks element of that to get to that. Dee was involved with the early committee on the splash pad, and so she helped get the funding together, so we had all those parts and pieces in there. It was reaching relative to park and recreation area requirements throughout the town, between neighborhood parks and pocket parks, Shamrock Glen, Doll Creek, where we're getting little pocket parks in those subdivisions. That plan was instrumental in having those in place, because although we talked about parks, we had no guidance or rules from that, and so it was really, well, we needed to have, but no one was forced to have. And so we've used that comp plan extensively for things like that. We used it for the grant projects that we went after. It's guided us through the Parents Park. I don't know if you remember the charrette that was done that showed the walking path around it and all those kind of things. It doesn't necessarily guarantee dollars in funding, but I think it took a pretty good look, and again, it was more emergent because we needed it for that grant application that we weren't successful on for the splash pad, but that's in there as one of the important elements. It was a standalone one, so it wasn't looked at the same time as the rest of it.
Okay.
Maybe just having that involved will help that be more cohesive for the whole thing.
If people are interested in getting involved in that, what might be some of the ways that they can?
Well, the planning commission's involved in the process, in the public process, so they'll be having a series of workshops and meetings through the planning commission and stuff in this next two-year cycle, as the consultants start bringing draft documents back, and whether the commission will go through, as we did several years, page by page and line by line, I can't tell you that. But that's where all the work will happen, is at the planning commission level, and that's their task. And then eventually it'll come to you guys as a report and a comp plan to be adopted.
Thank you. Down under the city's goals, I saw chickens, which was great. That was helpful to have that on there. One of the ones I questioned about, though, because it looked like it was from the city, and I didn't remember us talking about it. Maybe I just missed it, but the behavioral health facilities. What brought that on to the agenda?
So we have had, I think it's the same entity, but two different phone call attempts to try and bring facilities like that into the city limits in the current zoning that we have. And we don't have They aren't necessarily essential public facilities defined yet, but they are in a category now that through Department of Commerce again, we have to take a look at those and address those and perhaps identify areas where we may provide those. The entity that wanted to come in wanted to bring behavioral health facilities that had rooms that are locked and monitored 24 hours a day and all those kinds of things, pretty darn close to a holding facility, into a definition of a dental clinic or into our medical clinic side of the code. And quite honestly, our code doesn't have a definition that deals with those. And so we have to take a look and say, is there lands that they could be cited at and the ramifications for that? Then ultimately zoning that goes along with it as well. We may determine from a community size to satisfy the Department of Commerce that that type of facility, as far as citing that essential facility, is not in the means of a small town like us. But you have to go through the process of identifying and studying it, analyzing it, and putting your plan as to why or why not. And so right now, we don't address it very well. We've just said our zoning code, it's not a doctor's office. That's not the type of occupancy, and we said no to the zone they've looked at. So we have to take a good hard look at those.
Good. Yeah, that's one that I seeing Chuila flounder around us. They had some unexpected things happening there in their city. It's great. I was curious about that.
You know, the other one in there is cannabis.
Yes.
We're living on what our ordinance says about against federal state laws. But I think as Chuck guided us a few months ago is we may need to take a look and make sure if we need more than that we deal with it from a zoning standpoint. And obviously now's the time to talk about it both from a philosophy of allowed or not, or zoning or not, all those kinds of things. This planning document is the next one to start with, and then later the development regulations, should there be a location defined where they might fit.
Yeah, and the other set of things that I had questions on were the checklist and all the different things that were listed on there. They nicely highlighted the new ones, which were
not all of them.
But they didn't highlight all the new ones. Oh, okay. Well, caught my eye. There were some pretty politically divisive items on those. So there were some items that talked about these items, because they're not funded by the state, are not required by the state. With the other items on the checklist that don't have that little caveat, does that mean they are required by the state?
Well, and
the level.
The other part is it's about population levels as well in there. And so, same thing, we've had phone calls from developers wanting to use the provision about 50,000 population and make that stretch to us for higher and higher density residential stuff. And so you have to really look at the whole. It references a code section and a House bill or a Senate bill. You really, our consultant and us are going to read the whole thing to see where this is taking us, see if we qualify, and then we can decide. Even though it says 50,000 and above, for example, we can still choose to take those on ourselves as well. I'm not sure why, or if that would be smart, or those kind of things, but there are several in there that will come in and we'll have to visit.
And then one on page 23, it talks about not either allowing or not encouraging community types or community center type buildings out near the airport. And I believe we have one there's a private company or organization or group that's working on something like that. I just didn't know if that would somehow interfere with what they're doing, or if we should try to coordinate with them. They're in the planning stages. I think maybe they bought some property, but I just would.
Well, I'm not sure what or who that is. Is it in the city limits or is it in the county?
I believe it's in the city limits for where they're planning it. It's the gentleman that runs the jiu-jitsu place, along with some business partners, looking at a private enterprise, but based like a community center. And I didn't want us to suddenly put something in our code that would stop them.
Well, typically, depending on which airport overflight zone it's in now, may be restricted along those same lines. So in this airport master plan you look at later, there's a map way in the back that shows all these flight contour lines and define zones 1 through 6 and what's permitted in zones 1 through 6. But we have that now in our zoning where I haven't talked to someone specifically about that, but if it falls into in some of the zones, some of the traffic zones, if it falls into a thing where there's a congregation of people there under the same roof doing something, we're already supposed to restrict or limit that.
Okay.
And our zoning code between the light industrial zone and the airport overflight zone has some of those categories already.
Okay. I'll give them a call.
Yeah, I haven't talked to that gentleman.
Okay.
Daryl may have, I'm not sure, but
maybe they're just not that far in the process. But I just wanted to make sure we communicated with them and made sure they were aware of whatever the rules are and what they may change to in the future. That was all my questions.
You ready to vote?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Naomi, you with us?
Yes. Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion carried. Item D, airport master plan update and airport layout plan, JB Engineering. Tim, you want to do it?
Did you want to
Or Daryl?
kind of start it off, or do you want me to?
Sure.
Yeah.
So this master plan update it's a document that's used by Department of Transportation Aviation Division and the FAA. This is how we develop our 5-year capital improvement plan moving forward. It has taken a while. We had issues with COVID, issues with staffing changes at the FAA. It's been very slow to get there. They call it a 20-year plan. However, they like to update it every 10 years. In our previous 10-year plan, we completed, I would guess, 80 to 90% of everything we had listed there for projects. And the airport is very quickly outgrowing that plan. During the process, we've had community involvement, airport advisory board. We have advisory board members here tonight that are in support of it. We had council members that were part of it. We've had public outreach, even though some of that was a little bit limited during COVID. And this is the finished project, and it's the projects and the growth that we have planned for the next 10 years.
I cannot get this thing to work on both TVs, so pardon me. Sorry about that.
Top TV.
I can't get it to work on the bottom one. So it'll show.
Just steal a little bit.
Yeah, you can see it a little.
There we go.
Okay, so I'm Tim EK with JUB, and this is the airport master plan, as Daryl opened with and kind of gave a little intro to. So we have been working on this plan for quite some time. Council has seen a lot of this, so I'll quickly kind of go through and recap some of the documentation. We did leave, Roger was gracious enough to bring up the documentation, the report, the master plan itself, as well as the ALP, the airport layout plan drawing set, which is some of the things that has the zoning maps and airport overlay zones documented on those maps. And so I'll just take you through real quick where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. So some of the things we worked on were kind of the forecast summary, which talks about operations at the airport, the growth at the airport, where it is and where it's going, kind of the growth projections and trajectory. So you see, right now you see some turboprop, multi-engine aircrafts like a King Air, and then you also see jets. So there's a Falcon 900 out there. that we've looked at and kind of tracked operations and documented, as well as what the future could hold. So you see some larger aircraft like Gulfstreams in the future. Even currently, you'll have occasional larger jet aircraft, but the forecast section just talks about where we are and kind of where we're going and the growth that the airport is expected to see. And then we get into some facility requirements. So with that growth, what does that look like in terms of improvements? So if you're going to have larger aircraft, what does that mean for the infrastructure at the airport? So the main improvements or changes would be a slightly wider runway. Right now it's 75 feet, it'll go to 100 feet wide, strengthening, and some safety area widening. So there'll be some improvements at the airport that'll need to take place in order to support these aircraft, and that's kind of the crux of the facility requirements. And right now, there's some runway length evaluations we did. So currently it's 6,100 feet in length. In the ultimate condition, there are some runway extensions planned, but again, we'll more than likely have to do this plan update again before we get there. And then the land use. So Roger referenced the airport overlay zone. So with some of these improvements and some of the expansion of these zones, or may need to look at some changes to those to support some of the larger aircraft that we would expect moving forward. And this is the map that we did bring to council. So this is preferred alternative. So we came up with 3 alternatives, and they mainly revolved around moving the runway and the costs associated with that, the pros and cons of those. We said maybe we can move the runway north, or maybe we can shift the runway to the west. And I know this is several months ago, so bear with me, but the preferred alternative at that time was to leave the runway where it is. There will be some spray field impact, which we've accounted for, working with Roger and the city to make sure that the wastewater facility is not negatively impacted. And then we talk about the runway widening and the improvements that go with that. And on the south end, there'll be a approach light system included. So some details there, the preferred alternative, and this would help those larger aircraft and kind of for the future of the airport, the long-term future.
Did I hear you right? The spray field will have no major impact?
We will implement the impacts before we can finish the improvement. So it's a part of how we get to the ultimate improvements. So we're not going to reduce the capacity of the spray field without expanding it somewhere else. So we're not going to take parts and pieces offline before we make it larger. So
that's the blue half circle up there is the area. The challenge might be in the not too distant future how to fund that.
Yes.
Because
that's my big
FAA may not ever want to, or maybe they have to be coerced into help paying for that cost, but that's all part of the planning effort and the work that will have to happen.
Because one thing I'm adamant, the airport's a wonderful thing, and you've done a wonderful job out there. It's a benefit to the city, but I don't think that moving that spray field or whatever is going to happen to that spray field should be on the back of the Deer Park citizens. Okay,
We agree.
Good. No, it's because Deer Park citizens generally don't use too much of the airport. It's out there for their benefit if they want to use it, but everybody's too busy. And we have some larger aircraft owners that are pushing this thing, which is fine. It's a good thing. But I do not want it on the backs of Deer Park citizens. I do not want that. Okay, now I will be quiet.
Feel free to ask questions and comments as much as you want. So one part about the expanded wastewater facility, it will be expandable. So the hope is that it would serve multiple purposes. It will replace the sections being impacted, and it will also allow for some future growth by opening up kind of a center pitted system.
As long as the Deer Park citizens don't have to pay.
So we definitely have that in there. Understood. So real quickly, short-term implementation would be just those projects we just talked about, mainly centered around the runway, the widening, strengthening, spray field, and south end of approach light system, and even these past couple of weeks, the flight line has been developing like crazy. So I don't know if anybody's driven up Cedar Road recently, but if you're driving up the road and you're looking through the fence, there seems to be a new hangar being built every other week. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I know a lot of that Roger's been dealing with in terms of the permitting process and whatnot. But yeah, there's a ton of new hangars, a lot of activity and flight line development happening at the airport, and so these improvements will
No, I'm really
help
proud of
support
what
that.
the airport's become. I really am.
Intermediate term implementation, so that would be in like the 5 to 15 year range, are mainly just flight line. Again, it's supporting Darrell and the airport and creating space for development, hangar development, T-hangar development, or bringing in FBOs, and just different, being able to cater to the various sizes, small hangars, large hangars, and everything in between. And then the long-term improvement, now this long-term implementation will be 20 plus years out, so this shows kind of a runway extension on either end, and again, before that ever would happen, you would more than likely have to go through this process again. So at that point, the council at that time could say, yes, no, we want to do this, or we don't want to do this. So you kind of have another crack at the long-term improvements, which mainly centers around runway extensions and flight line development. So this busy drawing, this airport layout plan drawing, is the summary of the things we just talked about. So it shows all of the different improvements over time and how those impact the airport and the various things that are going to change over time. That's why it's so busy. And it's a lot easier to look at on paper, which is why we put those in your boxes. And so this is the document that one of the documents that we were asking council for consideration.
Right.
So we did want to summarize briefly the public process. So the FAA does require a public process. We've had technical advisory committee meetings, which you've been a part of, Dee, as well as public open houses. We had one. When did we have one last? Was that last week?
Like 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Excuse me. 2 weeks ago, we had an open house, which is the second one we've done. We've been to council, and we've been working closely with Darrell and Roger to make sure that this plan meets the city's needs. Yeah, it's been a long time in the making. I agree with Darrell. It's taken a long time working with the FAA, but here we are, kind of at the finish line.
Right.
So this is kind of that last step in terms of adoption. So, yeah, with that, questions, comments?
Entertain motion.
Did you have, Roger, did you want to ask?
I think everybody was waiting to see if there was questions.
Oh, good.
So I can make the motion.
Oh, did you want to?
Make the motion to approve.
Give me a motion second. No. You did not. Comments or questions by council?
It was wonderful.
Naomi, you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're good. So Tim, as I understand to make sure I'm correctly, the council approves this, then it still goes back to FAA. This is just one of the steps.
Right.
Goes back to them. There's still a chance for them to mess with it.
No, because they've actually come back already and said on the FAA side, they've approved it.
Okay.
They said, yeah, move forward.
Okay.
Then they were pushing it, saying, hey, where are you guys at with this? Why isn't this done? FAA has approved it, but there's a public process, and so we're here, and we need to honor that and make sure that the city, ultimately, this is the city's plan. So this is the most, in my mind, the most important step.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item E, Deer Park City Council tablets, emails, ADA compliance, and live streaming. That's going to be broken into 3 categories. ADA compliance, live streaming, and Deer Park City Council tablets and emails.
Make a motion. Oh, do we need a motion?
I'd like to make a comment.
Go ahead.
I feel that we're jumping way ahead of ourselves. We need to wait till at least have 7-member council. And there again, emails having to be stored and all the information having to be stored, we're going to have to hire another person. And right now, we can't afford that. So,
We want to run that subject? Okay, we're on that subject. Just, council emails, the tablets. We're on Deer Park City Council tablets and emails.
right, that's what I understand. And then I said, we need to wait till at least we have a 7-member council.
Jason, any comments, sir?
I have a couple of comments. I disagree. We've been doing email for 30-something years, and Deer Park is in the Stone Age. Where
Yeah, but I know, but you know how many times you get to talk to people
I get to talk to
instead of
people.
typing?
Yeah, I get to talk to people a lot, but you have to send documents electronically. But I was looking at this. I don't know why we need 7 laptops. We only have 5 members. One day we will have 7, but that's not now. And there are also some optional features, 27-inch monitors, backpacks, docking ports, that sort of thing. And so I was just doing some quick math. If we just went with 5 of the so the price for the laptops for the council, 7 laptops with all the features, is this $13,400. And if we went down to 5 and forgot and just left off, monitors and this other stuff, it would be $9,000. So that would be, I can't do that percent, it's like 40% less.
So I dropped in and talked with Brandon this week and asked him about some of the questions. So I was a little confused by some of the optional monitors and things myself. And those were just from what Vision provided. He wasn't recommending those, but they were on the list. And I asked him about the number of laptops and what they would be used for during the week. And actually, he was hoping for those to be available for city staff to use throughout the week, so that it's not just so that they're used more often instead of just by council on occasion. So I think that was the reason for the higher number, which made sense to me. And then I would keep the option for the backpacks, because anytime a council member, or it doesn't have to be a backpack, it could be a briefcase, but there needs to be some sort of packaging that comes with it, I think, so that anytime a council member or a staff member needs to transport it wherever, that we have that option. So I would just like to remind us of the history of this. I think the last time we had a formal vote on this was February of 2020. We voted against email and some of those options with the idea that we would talk to folks in Yokes in the post office, which is great. Love talking to people there. And of course, a month later, all of those things were shut down and we couldn't communicate in those ways. So I think it is well past time to avail ourselves of these options.
You can always pick up the phone.
Oh, I do. That's great. All the
Do you have the one that rotates?
All right, so I'm in the Twitter.
Does that have email?
That's on the line.
It has email on it. I don't use it.
I need a motion.
A motion to approve. I make a motion to approve because it has to be a positive motion.
And I'll second.
What exactly are we approving?
We are Deer Park City Council tablets emails.
Okay, thank you.
It's broken into 3 sections.
Thank you. Just make sure I understand.
Okay. Can you second it?
Sure.
Okay. Councilman Craig, how do you vote?
No.
Jason?
Yes.
Naomi, are you there?
Yes.
How do you vote for city emails?
Here. No.
Okay. Heather?
No.
Caleb?
Yes.
Motion failed on that. Next up, item ADA compliance. Need a motion on that?
Make a motion to approve of that. ADA, we have to be compliant.
I'll second.
Okay, we have motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Naomi?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion carried.
Yes.
And live streaming.
There again, motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Craig, how do you vote?
No.
Jason?
Yes.
Naomi?
No.
Heather?
No.
Caleb?
Yes.
Motion failed. Okay. Moving on. Ordinance, third reading. Ordinance 2023-1015, adding new chapter to 1030 to the Deer Park Municipal Code, authorizing operations of wheeled all-terrain vehicles. Motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor? Thank you. Item 10, consent agenda. Letter A, approval of all claims check number 410 through 095 through 41127 in the amount of $280,431.40 for the second half of April 2023. Item B, approval of payroll checks number 15022 through 15055, including PFML 941 taxes and health benefits in the amount of $137,577.90 for the month of April 2023. Item C, Deer Park Municipal Airport use agreements, advanced auto fabricators.
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Aye. Thank you. Item 11, council questions, comments, or reports. Dee, we'll start with you.
I'll pass it over to you.
Yes?
I did want to comment on the earlier citizen comment. Just that I respect all my colleagues. I don't agree with all my colleagues on every issue, but I do respect them. I will say one thing that frustrated me about the city council really 4 years ago was that there was no information about what happened at the city council except city council minutes, which you had to come down and get, and that's fine. But there was online chatter, and that was just about it. I think until Councilman Stapp started doing a weekly or every other weekly update, there was still no information. And so I try as best I can to give an overview update of what's going on. They are not minutes, they are my own ideas, they are my own opinions. I am very much biased. So in no way do I ever speak for the city, and I always make that clear. I do try to give.
You don't.
I don't speak for the city. I'm sorry.
Then take councilman, politician off your face page.
I don't speak for the city. I speak for myself as a councilman.
Yeah, but you. I'm sorry.
Citizen comment time is over. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so these are my own opinions, and I welcome any good faith discussion about them. That's always been an issue. So I also do make it clear who votes for what. I assume my colleagues here are fine with their votes, or proud of their votes. I'm proud of every vote that I make, and I stand by them. I think that's important for people to understand. So it's in no way to do any sort of personal digs at all. But this is how we inform people. So that's all.
Naomi, do you have anything you want to report?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Heather? Dale?
Yes, so we received the final report from MMEC Architects on the work that they've done, and they're going to work on getting that into binders and specified and getting that to the city council, just so we have that report to keep on hand for the future. The task force is continuing to meet as we explore funding options, and each member of the task force has specific things to pursue as far as starting that process of looking for grants and other funding. My part of that process is to contact the legislators. So I've been talking to Senator Short's office, Representative Maycomber's office, and Congresswoman Kathleen Morris-Rogers' office to begin the process of asking both for their help to direct us to any sort of funding that might be there, and then to begin the process of asking them to represent us in asking for funding. So, and then there are other ways that we can pursue that as well. So we're not expecting any real action or updates on that for probably months, maybe a year or two. We're just working through the different pieces that we can for now. So thank you for the update on that. I would agree with some of the citizen comments about moving the citizen comments towards the end. I do think that makes it more helpful for us to hear after they've kind of watched the discussion, for us to hear from them on their thoughts on that. I think that would be helpful. I agree with Joe about the unrelated agenda items. That is somewhat confusing. So that was a good comment. And then, let's see. Again, I'm very excited for the iWorQ's permitting process. I think that's going to be really valuable to the city, and I would really strongly encourage to get as much access for citizens as we can, because I think that'll be really valuable.
Good. Okay, item 12, executive session. We're going to take comments are over.
You wouldn't call on me.
Oh, sorry.
Let's go, Vic. You knew.
There were some questions that we wanted to ask. And we were not given the I know, and you told me that we would have the opportunity later on. So I did not sign that.
On the sheriff's? On the sheriff's deal?
Yes. And we did not have the opportunity. Jim was raising his hand. He did not have the opportunity.
Well, my apologies.
And like I say, this is not right.
Okay.
And it's very upsetting to know that we have corruption on our city council.
Thank you, Vicki. So we're going to go to executive session for 15 minutes, Steph? 15? We will not be conducting any more city business. So you're all free to leave.
Just so the people that are here understand, at the end of the 15-minute executive session, now it may be extended at 5-minute increments to whatever period of time the council needs for those two items in executive session. Then they will come back in here and formally adjourn the meeting, and that will be the only action that's taken. So if you want to stick around to see that happen, you're more than welcome. And then they'll go back into an exempt session that is exempt from the Open Public Meetings Act and conduct that exempt session for collective bargaining. So. And then when they come back after that, they don't have to adjourn it or
Can I
anything.
have 1 minute?
Yeah.